are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, this is Leslie Pelch at Vermont Center for Geographic Information, and I want to welcome you to our webinar. I'm probably going to wait another minute or two before we officially start, just because a few more people are signing in as I'm talking. We're going to start out today with a brief overview of how the webinar works, so we're all on the same page. I'm sure a number of you have heard me say that too many times. And that'll just take a couple minutes, and then we'll get right into using the new interactive map viewer. I'm just going to wait about another minute, and then we'll start. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and start. So as I said, for any of you who have come on in the last couple minutes, I am Leslie Pelch. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. And we're going to do a very brief intro overview right now of how the webinar works, and then we'll get started on the meat of the subject, talking about the new interactive map viewer, little tour. So hopefully you can all see my screen, and it points out a few things. The fact that you should be able to open and close your GoToWebinar panel by clicking on this little orange button with an arrow on it. So if you find that your panel is kind of in the way of your ability to see things, you just have to click on that to make it collapse over to the right, and then click on it again to open it back up. You can also, oops, this up just a little more. You can also, there we go, set your audio settings. So if anybody's seeing this but maybe not able to hear, make sure to go in and open up the audio section of your panel and make sure that your audio mode is appropriate to what you're using. If you're using the telephone, if you're using a mic and speakers. And there's also a little button here for audio setup to make sure that I guess it's to make sure that either your computer or GoToWebinar are recognizing anything that you have plugged in that you're trying to use. The way that you're all muted, so you don't have to worry about any noises going on in the background where you are. If you would like to submit questions or comments at any time, you have a place to type those in also on your panel. Most likely I will, for the most part, I'll wait until the end to answer those. But actually, as I say that, I realize I do want to ask everyone if they have particular aspects of the interactive map viewer that they would like me to cover during the course of the webinar. So I might actually ask that at the beginning. And then the final thing is that everybody will receive a kind of a follow-up email from GoToWebinar afterwards, about sometime tomorrow, and it will include a link to where the recorded version of today's webinar will be posted. So if anybody was wondering whether this was going to be recorded so that they could direct someone else to check it out, it will be. It is being recorded, rather, and I post that recording at the VCGI website, and you'll get an email with a link to that posted recorded webinar. So it sometimes takes me a little while to get around to posting it, and feel free to remind me if it seems like it's been too long. But I will post that. So we're going to go to the VCGI website so I can show everybody. Oh, I forgot. One other thing that I usually do as part of my intro is to encourage everyone to, just go back to that for a second, to, encourage everyone to try out the little yellow or orangish colored hand that you will see also on your panel. If everybody could just click on that for me, that lets me know that you can hear me, and that's called raising your hand. It's a way to either get my attention or just let me know that you can hear me, which is very helpful to me. Great. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, I don't know how I forgot to do that. I always do that. All right, so back to the VCGI website. And I am going to start out by just pointing out how you can get to how you can get to the interactive map viewer. So the easiest way is a link right on our front page of our website. Down here below the news and events, it says Vermont Interactive Map Viewer. Another way to get here is to go to the Map Center, which is the tab all the way on the right on our web page, and it's the first interactive map listed there. And although we're not going to go there today, I just want to point out to you that the Agency of Natural Resources mapping site is also linked here, and they have a interactive mapping application that is based on the same program as this is, and so it's very similar. It's a lot of the same functionality and tools and ways of doing things. It's different in the data that is included on that, the map layers, and somewhat in terms of the functionality that they've chosen to turn on. I'd say that their site does a little more. It's obviously targeted a little bit more towards natural resources issues, but it covers a lot of different natural resource issues. And that's the Natural Resource Atlas. So I encourage you to check that out after this if you have a chance, if you haven't already. But we're not going to have time to do that today. So once you've chosen a viewer, I'm just going to do the page. We just click on it. One nice change that you may have noticed if you used the previous interactive map viewer is that you don't have to go to a launch page anymore. It does go directly to the viewer. And again, if you've checked it out already, you've probably noticed that there's a lot of the same functionality. It's not exactly the same, but a lot of the functionality is the same. For the most part, I would say we're getting a little bit more functionality. I know that there are definitely some issues with some stuff. Some of the changes have resulted in losing some things that we have done in the past, but we will hopefully cover most of those. Oh, and I also wanted to start out by apologizing and just sort of warning you that I in particular haven't had, well, none of us here have had all that much time to work with this new viewer yet. So we're definitely going to come up against my own ignorance periodically. So I encourage you to ask questions, and I will try to track down answers to things, but if it's quite possible that we will come to questions that I can't answer today, just because we've only had this up for about a month, and I have not spent that past month actually playing with it. I've just spent some of that time. So here we are at the viewer. The basic idea here is that it works very similarly to a regular GIS program, real GIS software that you might download and put on your computer. We have a list of data layers or map layers over on the left in the information panel area, and we call that the information panel because it can be different things actually. In this application, it's really just either the list of map layers or the legend. And notice that I just clicked on the button down at the bottom of the screen to toggle that into a legend. So you just toggle back and forth. And the legend only shows what's actually visible at this zoom level. We also have the map view, the map area right over here. That's rather obvious. Within the map area, we do have some new and different ways to interact with this application. One is the orange I want to button, and if you click on that, what you actually get is really a menu of options, and this is kind of a quick links menu. It gives you direct links to some of the functionality that you'll find it exists in other places. It exists in various lists of tools and tabs. But this sort of the list of most popular things that we think that people would be likely to want to get to quickly, and so it's right there. And notice that if all you want to do is zoom in and out a little bit and look at stuff here, you can actually turn the toolbar off with the Show Hide Advanced Toolbar. And I'll mention that in the Natural Resources Atlas on the A&R website, I believe their viewer actually opens up like this with the toolbar turned off, so you actually have to go in here and turn it on in order to access this functionality. All right, so we have the orange I want to menu. We also, over on the right side of the map, have the background menu. So this is where we get to choose what kind of background we have. So this is a little bit different from the previous viewer where it was the background, either imagery or plain map, was just some more data layers over in the list of data layers, list of map layers. Now the background is kind of broken out and offered as a separate set of choices. Plain background is what you see here. We can switch it to Vermont color imagery, which is going to be different imagery depending on what scale you're at. I should point out it's not one data layer or one imagery layer that this is referring to. Then we have Vermont black and white orthos. Obviously at the fully zoomed out scale, these options are not that exciting. We also have 3 options that come through Esri that are kind of nice. The Esri USA Topo Map, the light gray map. This obviously is more of interest if you want to highlight the vector data that you've chosen to show rather than the background. And then the Esri Street Map, which is potentially an alternative to or addition to our roads data. So I'm going to put that maybe back on the black and white orthos. The other thing that we see in this map area is the zoom in and out bar, similar to the Google applications that we're all familiar with using. It gives you a very quick ability to zoom in while staying centered on the same spot. You can also do the pan option kind of automatically here, where you drag the map around. You can also click on the plus and the minus as a way to zoom in or out. Down in the right-hand corner, right lower corner of the map, you'll see a little locator map. It gives you an idea of where you are, not so much in the state maybe, but just it gives you a slightly more zoomed out view so you can see where you are in relation to some other features. If you don't want that there, you just click on this little arrow in the left corner and make it go away. And then obviously over on the left here we have a scale bar. Let me just check in whether anyone has asked any questions. And actually, so I will mention now that if this would be a fine time if anybody does have very specific things you really want to make sure that I'm going to address if possible, that you're not sure that I will. My plan is pretty much to go through all the functionality fairly quickly, but to cover all the tools here and at least talk about them. Many of them we'll be able to demonstrate. But if you have a question that you think won't be covered by that, feel free to send it. Oh, I do have a question. All right, I'm going to do a little bit more and then I'll look over the questions. Okay, so that's the stuff that we find in the map view area. The top part of the screen we call the tabs and tools area. There are 4 tabs here. The Getting Around tab, that has a set of tools in it. The Maps and Data Sources tab has a set of tools and options within it. The Tasks tab has mostly drawing tools, but also the printing and exporting of the image options. And then the Analysis tab has some identify tools, some measuring tools, and some tools related to coordinates, entering coordinates or plotting coordinates on the map. Outside of those tabs, we see 2 more options up here in the upper left. So notice that those are not within any of the tabs. They're kind of all the way to the left outside. And one is the saved project and one is the open project. And we'll talk about that just a little bit later, but just so you don't think I'm going to ignore those. All right, that's kind of everything we see here. So I guess we can start. Let me just take a look at the questions and then we'll start. Okay, so first set of tools, fairly obvious, pan. So by clicking on any of these tools, these first 3, turns your cursor into that tool. So right now this is a pan tool, which means I can grab the map and drag it around. The zoom in tool gives us another option for zooming. So we've got the slider bar, which is always here, but we can also zoom in by, just like in an ArcGIS program or another GIS program, by drawing a box. And the way that I'm drawing that box, for anybody that's not familiar with this way of zooming in, is I'm right-handed, so I start in the upper left corner. You can start anywhere you want. I push down on my left button. I drag my mouse until the box is about the extent that I want, and I let go, and it zooms in to approximately that extent. Notice that in the Getting Around tab, we also see the map scale expressed as a relative fraction. And you'll also notice that your options here, you can choose to change your scale by clicking on this little arrow and picking from these options. You may notice that they're slightly odd numbers, not what you would call standardized, like 1 to 5,000 scale. And this is, I think, one of the few unfortunate things about our new application, because everything in this application is done in the Web Mercator projection. And because the imagery in the background is cached imagery, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining, but it basically means they're pre-rendered or pre-created images of the imagery at different scales. So a bunch of time was spent creating a pile of pictures of this imagery at different scales, appropriately detailed for that scale. And by doing that and by letting this application take advantage of that, it speeds up the drawing of those images in the background. That's why Google has been so successful at creating applications that seem to work really well and draw everything really quickly, is because they've used cached imagery. So for those two reasons, because there's cached imagery and because this is a Web Mercator projection being used, we don't have kind of our normal choices for scale. We are limited to the scales at which the cached imagery was created and then turned into Web Mercator. So that's my best explanation for why that is, and it's one of the more unfortunate things. Okay, so some other zoom out. Obviously, you don't really draw a box. You just sort of click on the map, left click on the map, and it'll zoom out a predetermined amount. The other 3 or 4 really extent options, zooming options. Initial extent just takes us back to statewide. And I have a feeling that if we were opening an existing project, it would take us back to whatever the initial extent was when we opened the project. We can test that a little bit later. Full extent also is that's always going to just take you out to statewide, since this is a Vermont application. And then previous extent, I actually had to use this just the other day. I accidentally clicked on something and either zoomed in or out to some ridiculous level, and previous extent very conveniently brought me back to just the previous level. Previous zoom level, and then next and previous, you can kind of go back and forth if you have nothing better to do. For some reason, there's a point identify option in here. We'll see it in one of the other tabs, but point identify turns our cursor into a identify tool. We'll do a quick foray into getting the search results table here. So I clicked on a road, although it doesn't know for sure what I was trying to click on. So it's actually, if we look down at the search results table at the bottom of the page, we see what feature I clicked on in the roads map layer, what feature I clicked on in the state highway shield map layer, data layer, and then town boundaries. I'm always going to be clicking on some town boundaries, so that always comes up. And you can see that this is giving us access to the attribute data within that data layer for that particular feature. Or often if you click and you're really clicking more than one feature, it'll just list all of the different features that you might be clicking on. And then we can just close that, make that go away. Yes, we will do that. Okay. All right. So those point identify. So I mentioned that we can change scale by just picking different scales right here. Here's something I haven't done yet, I just realized. So you can create a map bookmark, which basically just means saving a particular zoom level and extent as a bookmark. So I could say, yes, this exact view and extent is what I would like to save. Oh, I can give it a name. And now if I want to, let's go back to full extent, and if I want to jump to a map bookmark, there it is. So there's a convenient way. If you know that you generally want to zoom to a particular level rather than having to remember how to get there or drawing a box, you just use a map bookmark. There's actually a pretty good help system. I'll very briefly show you that. if you just click on help, it's going to link you to a variety of different things. You can sort of drill into this a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind if you'd like to come back and you do still have questions. You can quickly get into that help system. What's this? Allows us to click on the map. Ooh. So this is what we would use if we have a question about a specific, maybe, no, maybe not. Oh yeah, okay, so if I click on some things, at least on the map, it doesn't look like I can click on things out here. Hold on. Toolbar, all right, so it allows me to click on various things within the application and jump directly to that section of the help. Okay. That's all. I can do the transparency of the whole thing, all of the map layers on the left, other than obviously this doesn't include the background because the background is separate. Oh, maybe before we move on, I'll mention that. So in the map layers, if you right-click on a layer, you get some information, which is what the symbol is, so you don't have to switch over to the legend to see one particular data layer symbol. It also tells you the visible scale, because that's something I forgot to point out. You'll notice this. Some of the layers here are grayed out. Some of them don't have checks next to them, but also some of them are grayed out. And if they're grayed out, that means they're not available at this particular zoom level. And if you're particularly interested in that map layer, you might right-click, see what the visible scale is, and more importantly, perhaps zoom to visible scale. So I apparently had zoomed in a little bit too far to still see the town names, and I can just automatically zoom back out. Another thing that you may have noticed is that for some of the data layers, not all of them, mostly for the simpler data layers, I would say, like county boundaries, probably town boundaries as well, no, actually, I'm sorry. I was about to say we could change the symbology, but we can't. But it'll tell us the symbol. So that's the main thing. The fact that you can see what the visible scale is, and you can actually zoom the map to the visible scale so that that feature, that layer rather, shows again. And that's all. Okay, so let's move on. Just see if there's anything that I need to answer right now. So just so you know, someone asked about adding property line info, parcel data layers, and I will indeed be showing that in a moment. Alrighty. So maps and data sources. Let's look in here. There's a Show Layers button, which is a little bit redundant. It's just if I happen to be showing the legend right now, I have another way to click on getting back to the layers. Because just like real GIS, it's important to have about 4 different ways to do everything. Enable map tips. So map tips are simply, I need to have something turned on that I can show you. Oh, road names. Well, map tips just give us, let's turn buildings on. It allows us to just click on the map without having to say we want to identify something, and give us information about a particular feature that we're clicking on. So if I click, all right, so I have not turned on an identify tool right now, but I can click on a feature and it will show me a little bit of information. Notice that it not only says this information, it also gives me the ability to click on View Additional Details, which opens up, there's not actually a lot here, but it does open up. And to be honest, that's a question I have for our database administrators, why it is that there doesn't seem to be any attribute information with the buildings data, which is the 911 data. And there's not a lot of options here in the map tips, except that you can decide you don't want road names or buildings to be included in map tips. And again, I'm not sure exactly why we only have those two. There we go. There's a road map tip. Why we only have those two options. Here's some more attributes for road data. All right, so that's map tips. So in the Add Data section of the Maps and Data Sources tab, we've got three interesting options here. One I'm actually not going to demonstrate just because I haven't practiced this ahead of time and I don't want to waste time trying to make something work and then not being able to figure it out. But you do have the option to add a map service. And if anybody's not familiar with what a map service is, again, my short definition is that it is the ability to connect to a map, a dynamic digital version of a map or a map layer or series of layers over the internet. So you can see here that we need a URL in order to find a map service, or we can do, let's just try this. There. So not that we need to add the VGIS base map because it's already here, but if that was what we were looking for, there it would be. Another time I will demonstrate this more fully, but you can certainly play with this and try to find some other, because for instance there's a lot of Esri map services, USGS has map services, and looks like the keyword search works pretty well to search for things. So that is an option, and that's going to actually add something on top, I believe. I don't actually know whether it's going to be on top or below, but we can also add a shapefile. So here is how we add something like, for instance, and that is indeed my example, parcel data. The most important thing to realize about adding a shapefile, so for anyone who's not familiar with shapefile, that's just a very common GIS data format. If you download data from VCGI, you would probably be downloading a shapefile. Or if you got GIS data from another source, like Parcel Data from somewhere else, you would save that data onto your computer or onto a drive that you have access to. When you click on Add Shapefile, you need to know that you actually need to add all three of these files, because one shapefile really is composed of 3 to 9 files. These three, even if there are 9, these three are the three that you absolutely have to, and the only three that you have to add when you're adding this shapefile. You can't just add 1 or 2 of these. And I'll just point out that the DBF, the one that ends in .dbf, is the attribute data. PRJ is the projection information, so it's telling this application that this is Vermont State Plane Coordinate System data. And then the SHP is the information about what the shape and location of the actual features are. So as long as I do that, and it takes just a few seconds, you have to be a little bit patient and keep your eye on the information panel. So we've just added VT Parcels Bolton. It's a little hard to read, but and it's under graphic layers, so we've got our operational layers that we started out with, and then now we're starting to add some graphics layers. And of course we don't see anything yet because this is in Bolton and we're in Randolph. So we can zoom to extent, and now we're over in Bolton. Notice also we have some other things that we can do in here. We can change the symbology of the layer to a limited extent. We can't change the color, but we can change the transparencies of the border and the fill, which is kind of nice because actually the fill I don't need so much, the border is good. I can change the thickness of the border if I care about that. And then once we've done that, we can say, okay, even within that, we can, or whatever we set for that, we can also quickly change the transparency of the layer by using this little nice little slider bar. So all right, so we've added a shapefile. We cannot label. As far as I can tell, we still do not have the ability to label, which is kind of too bad. Hoping that eventually that also is some functionality that gets added in a later version of this. So not only can we add this visually, even though it's called a graphics layer, it is a real data layer in here. It's a real GIS data layer, which means we can access the attribute information. And we'll see that a little bit later. I'm going to demonstrate the measure tool and show you that we can kind of compare our dynamic measuring that we can do here with some data that's actually in the attribute data for this parcel data layer. So the other option is to add CSV, a CSV file. So a CSV file is basically a spreadsheet that has been saved as a text file. CSV stands for comma separated. Where's the V? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what the V is, but comma separated. And so if you had a spreadsheet that had, say, latitude, longitude coordinates in it, or perhaps Web Mercator coordinates, you could add that file, and this application will be able to interpret that and show it on here. So if you had points maybe that represent each having a coordinate, that would be able to be represented on here. Again, I haven't tried this yet, so I'm not going to completely demonstrate that. Right, so these two options just to the right that say external mapping, keep in mind that these they're not part of the background menu. These do not add Bing Maps or Google Maps as a background. What they actually do is say, oh, this is where you are in the world, you're in Bolton, and if I were to click on Bing Maps or Google Maps, it would open up Bing Maps or Google Maps as a separate window and go there, go to this location in Bing Maps or Google Maps. And actually I can do that real quick since it'll be fast. So there's Bolton in Bing Maps, which is actually kind of nice because both Bing and Google have some very recent imagery these days. So if you were wanting to look at different imagery but for exactly the same location that you're looking at in our viewer, you could very quickly just check out whether there's something more recent or higher resolution in one of those. Okay, so those are our it's giving me a tip. Oh, Stephen may have told me something that will make me very happy. Oh, you know what? Thank you, Stephen Smith. Thank you for reminding me of this, because now that I look at it, I realize I did figure this out when we very, very first played with this. So you can change the color of data layers that you bring in, shapefiles that you bring in. Thank you for reminding me of that, because you need your parcel boundaries to be bright pink, or at least I do. Okay, so let's move on to the tasks bar, my time-wise. So in the tasks tab, we have a bunch of drawing options here in the middle, as well as some other options. So if we were ready to print, we could click on print map, and actually I'll point out that print map actually means create a printable map. It doesn't, clicking on this does not take you right to the printer window. Export map allows you to just create an image of your map, just the map, just the map part of this whole screen that we're looking at. So export map, you basically just choose your format, image format, and let's just see. And then we can view the image, and then we can save the image. And obviously once we've saved it, we can put it as an attachment on email or bring it into some other type of document. Print map actually allows us to create a map in the larger sense, not just an image, not just the map view part of this screen, but a full map with a title and the list of data layers. So we get to choose our orientation and size, which is limited, but we do have a few options here. Our output format, so we can do a PDF or we can do a bunch of different image files, image formats. 2 choices for DPI. Map scale, you may remember, those of you who use the old interactive map viewer, that we do have that there are issues when you change the scale from, or actually even if you don't. If you change the scale or if you stick with current extent, sometimes your map will come out looking different. Like sometimes the imagery might turn off, although in this case the imagery doesn't turn off. You might actually end up looking at slightly different imagery if you're right on the edge of a cache level. And we did put in here some more normal scale options like 1 to 5,000, 1 to 24,000, 1 to 2,000. The program has to fudge a little bit to create those, so a little warning about that, but they are at least options. I'll stick with current extent. And then you can give it a title. And you can fill in some notes, which is nice. They come out in a small font, but there's actually a decent little sized area on the map. And the nice thing about this is you can say something like, this map shows da 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 da, and was created to do whatever. So it's nice to include that type of information. And then when you say create file, again, it just takes a few seconds. And then we should be able to look at a halfway decent looking map for being very quick to create. Of course, it's not going to be quick today. Okay, maybe we won't wait for it to finish. I did it earlier. It worked just fine. Just takes a few minutes. I'm going to cancel for now. So when it's ready, it says click here for map. You open up. You see a map that has title across the top, bunch of other information, list of map layers, locator map. Your information that you typed in will be down in the bottom right corner. Makes a nice map that you can actually print out or save as a PDF and then send as an attachment that you can use to convey information. All right. View results is an interesting little button because it takes us back to any search results that we've already done. So this is the results that we got earlier when I clicked on the map, and it just allows us to go back to this. View history. If I had done more than one search in this particular session, they would all be listed here, and it would say what time and what I did, and I would be able to say, oh, I want to look at that one again, that particular search result, because I've only done one. That's all it shows. Notice you also have options like export to CSV. So again, a CSV format would allow you to open it up in something like Excel. So if you did a search or we'll see some other options for identifying and actually basically selecting certain features and why you might end up wanting to export that data. But for now, we're going to close that back up. Okay, so here are drawing options. Nice thing about drawing options is that it allows us to say, okay, I see this property here, but I want to indicate that I'm thinking about subdividing or creating a park in the middle of the woods here, and I'm going to draw it, and what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the map to create each vertex. And when I'm done, I double click, and then it knows to stop. Otherwise, I'll just keep my cursor will keep dragging pieces of polygon around. But as soon as I double click, it knows I'm done with that particular polygon. Oh, and let's say now I want to do a circle. I always forget to do this, so I'll remind you all to do this. It's a good idea to set your border and fill and thickness and colors before you start drawing, because when I clicked on Edit Drawing earlier, it didn't seem like I could change the color. Probably it's going to turn out I can, but and again, fill, opacity, and then thickness of the border. Let's make the fill. There, we'll make it really attractive little object. So we can draw things on here. We can add them. We can put text on here. Oh, I can add labels. Look at that. That's good to know. We can change font, we can change size, we can change color of our text. So let's try Edit Drawing. Yeah, when I click on this, it doesn't seem... So I just right-clicked on this. I think that's any right-click, yeah. That's interesting. If you right-click on your map, you can center it, you can draw a point, add some text, export a map image, or open Google Street View. Again, something I hadn't done until just now. So basically when I click on Edit Drawing, it seems like all I can really edit, unless I'm missing something, is kind of the size or the location. I can drag it around. I can drag the size bigger or smaller and the proportions. Does not seem like I can change the colors. Okay, we can obviously erase a particular. That's interesting. Okay. Erase a particular drawing that we've done by just clicking on Erase Drawing and then clicking on the object. Or obviously if we've just been playing around, we want to clean it up, we can just do Clear All Drawings. And luckily it gives you a warning, so I'll cancel that. All right, so those are our drawing options. Pretty much for any of these, you can see that you can change opacity, color, size, that kind of thing. Something I hadn't turned on before is building address labels, so I'll go ahead and turn that on. So buildings, you notice, is grayed out, so we'll try zoom to visible scale. So we get some buildings. Oops. There's some buildings. And we'll just turn on address labels. Oh, which also is not yet. I zoom in. Wow, you really have to zoom in to get address labels. That's interesting. So there's address labels. Okay, so we're moving into the Analysis tab. Analysis includes a bunch of identify tools. So there's several different ways to identify, and what identify means is, again, you know, I haven't done a description of what GIS data is because I'm assuming most of you are at least somewhat familiar with it. GIS data consists of both the geometry, which is the shape and location of the features. So we have points, we have lines. The points would be the little squares that show where buildings are. The lines would be maybe the to be honest, the road data, not so much the parcel data, because the parcel data is technically polygons. But if we were to turn that off, so this is a line feature showing the road, and then an area might be these ponds, or actually the parcel data, if it was not quite so empty in the middle, you would see that. So these are polygons. And then the other information that is part of GIS that really makes it so very dynamic and useful is the attribute information, the tabular information. Each of these features has some kind of tabular information associated with it. So let's actually look at a little bit of tabular information. I clicked on Point Identify, which just means I'm going to just click on a point on the map and see what happens. And what I get is the parcel data and the town boundary data. So in the parcel data, I've clicked on one parcel, so that's what's showing here. And what we're seeing is the attribute data in this one line of information. And if we go along, one cell in this table is called parcel number, pprop, psub, and one that is of particular interest because we can sort of look at this is acres. So this particular parcel is listed, and this is essentially the grand, well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know for a fact if this is the grand list, but this is the type of information you'd find in your grand list, in this case attached to the parcel data, 2.7 acres. The town boundary layer obviously is just going to be showing Bolton because we're not on the edge of the town, we're just right in the middle of town. So if this says that this particular property is 2.7 acres, is there a way that we can kind of check if we agree with that, or maybe just sort of see whether we can measure it and come up with about that same acreage? So in the measurement tools section here, we can do measure area, And what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to do it in acres. Remember to, I don't care so much about the perimeter area in acres. Okay, so now I can just sort of trace this property approximately, and keep in mind that it's not the most accurate thing in the world, but we can do our best. That's a fairly easy property to do. Road curves a bit. And we double click when we're done. So you can see that what this came up with was 2.56 acres. It says it both on the map and up here. And notice that once you finish your measurement, you can actually add it as a drawing. And let's close this for just a second. And notice that when you add things, like the drawings I did earlier, and also this measurement drawing, it shows up down in the graphics layer. So like I could turn off parcels briefly, and you can see that it really is there. I think I can, no, I guess I can't change the way that looks. But so we've got that, and now let's go back to, and the layer does have to be on in order for us to do the identify on it. Go back to that parcel, and what does it say in here for acreage? 2.7. So, you know, it's not exact, but 0.2 or 0.14 acres off. That's not too bad. Keeping in mind that generally parcel data is not, or even listed acreages are not always all that accurate. It's in the right vicinity, so that's reassuring. Okay, so there's some demonstration of the measuring options. The distance measurement works pretty much the same way. You can set your units and draw your line, and you double click when you're done. And you can actually, as you can see, you can measure perimeters this way too. Each time I click, it creates a vertex. And it tells us the last segments in the total right up here in the measurement info. Let's check. Okay. So we have other ways to do identify. We have freehand, line, polygon, rectangle. What these mean, let me just turn this back off, and I'm going to clear plotted measurements, yep. What this means, and I will warn you that when I tried this morning, I had some questions about how exactly this works, because it's either a little bit inconsistent or I'm not getting some limitation on it. So freehand identify is kind of neat. It means you can literally, so I'm just holding down my left button on my mouse and I'm drawing. I'm kind of making a little lasso around some points. So as you can see, the thing that puzzles me is that I'm not getting the buildings data layer here, and I'm not sure why. Because you can see that the display for option here in the location information section seems to include all of these layers, including the buildings layer. So I'm not sure why it's not showing up down here. It's just picking up roads and town boundaries. This is something I plan to ask someone here about and hopefully figure out why. And to be honest, a few times this morning it did pick up the buildings, so I'm not quite sure about that. It could be the freehand identify, because I think maybe when I did the polygon identify it worked. So vertices, double click. Yeah, so the polygon, maybe the rectangle, do pick up the buildings. Another question I have is, you can sort of see here that we have two buildings being picked up. No attribute information. Don't know why that is. And you can see that it is actually these two buildings. So again, I'm not sure what that's about. It's picking up the road information. The town obviously is just the town. So if we had done a meaningful selection of some kind, an identification, and we really wanted information about the roads in this area or something, we could export this information as CSV. So we'd be exporting just the attribute information out. All right, I'm going to finish up here. All right, so the rest of the identifiers work pretty much the same, just give you different shapes that you can use. The buffered identity if we turn that on, hold on, just close this. And let's say we do a line. When we turn on the buffer, it asks us what units and what distance. Oops. And you can choose to add the buffer to the markup again, so it'll show up as an actual drawing if we want to. And we click OK. We get not only a buffer, but also this results table. So you can see what it did was create a buffer of that distance away from that line that I drew. It doesn't keep the line itself. But, and there's our results table. So this sort of picked up what features intersect with this buffer that I've created. All right, measuring units. Okay, so then the final thing in here is the coordinates, which are two really nice options. If you have, let's say, gone for a hike in the woods and you have collected some coordinates that you believe are either your parcel boundary or corners, or just maybe the location of a great place to hunt for deer or whatever, or the location of some rare plant that you want to tell Agency Natural Resources about. You've collected that information, you have those lat-long coordinates, you can plug them in here, and I don't have an example set of coordinates here, but you plug them in here and it's going to pan to that spot on the map, and it'll actually create and label a little, it'll create a little label for that spot on the map with those coordinates. So that's kind of a cool feature. It takes you right to wherever you were, even though at the time you may have not really had a good sense of where exactly you were out there in relation to other features on the Earth. The other option is the plot coordinate option, which is I can be looking at the map, and I might say, for instance, let's go back to parcel data here. Just there. And let's say we wanted to figure out where exactly this back corner of one of these spaghetti lots is. And I said, I want to plot the coordinate there because then I can go out with my GPS and try to find it. And there it is. So I've not only put it on my map visually, which is kind of nice, there it is, but I can write that down or do whatever to put it into my GPS and then go hiking out in the woods and get lost. So both of those are kind of neat options. Notice that you actually have some choice, although again, I have a little bit of an issue with the fact that we don't have Vermont State Plane coordinates as an option here, but you do have some choice over here. You can choose, default is indeed Web Mercator. These are not two different things. You have Web Mercator coordinates, if that's meaningful to you in some way, and then you have three different options for lat long. Decimal degree minute second. DDM is decimal degree minute, I think. Not quite sure about that, so I'm sure somebody out there knows that. But so depending on which format you have your GPS set up to or that you want to use, you can change to that. So that's kind of a nice option. All right, we're getting close to the end, and I think I've covered most of what I wanted to. It's quite possible that I'm wrong. Oh, I know, the final thing. If you wanted to do something like search for an address, notice that there's not a search function in all of these tools and tabs, but up the very top, just above the toolbar, is actually a search bar, and you can just type in an address. Click on enter or the little search thing, and again we get a search results table. Now notice that nothing has happened on the map yet, but as soon as we click on any of the results in that search results table, it does pan and zoom right to that location. Now I noticed that our geocoder, you can see this is geocode results, are not perfect because I did end up oh, actually no, that time it did work. I did this yesterday and it didn't quite go to 58 Main Street, but so that's the location of VCGI if anybody cares. And I can turn off those address labels, but obviously the address labels allow us to check that. So that is how you search. And again, you can do the export to CSV and everything too, if that search results is of interest. Okay, I'm going to turn to questions now. So if anybody has any more questions, I'm going to look at any that are in here that I haven't answered yet. Okay, there's a question about background layers that I think I'm not going to answer now. I will answer that directly to that person. And okay, so somebody asked, where do we locate and download parcel files for a particular town? And I will very quickly answer that. And anybody that has other questions, take a moment to compose them and send them in now. So parcel data is available a few different ways. The simplest way, for the most part, is to go to VCGI's website, VGIS Data Warehouse. This is where you can access all of the data that we have available that's for download, either the data warehouse or the imagery, which is where orthophotos are. But the data warehouse is where you'll find parcel data, and if you just use the keyword search and type in parcels and then click on the word go, you'll see. So again, we get a search results table similar to in the mapping application. And if we want to download, we click on the little icon under the word download, and it takes you to a tool that shows you what's available. So the stuff that is shaded kind of red or orange or pink or this yellow hatching, those are all the towns that are available from us. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see town names. So if I wanted to download one of these, I would change my cursor to a selection tool, back to the selection tool, which is the bottom left. I would click on the town, and it would tell me it's available, and I click on the words download now to download it. And this would download that exact same shapefile. Actually, I think it might be a slightly updated one now than the one I just was demonstrating, but it would be a zip file, a zipped version of that shapefile, which means you just have to unzip it in order to access all of the files that are in there. So that's a very quick version of that. If you look at the webinar archive, which you will receive a link to tomorrow, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there is a webinar about using our website, about the VCGI website and accessing data. So if you want, you could check that out if you're not that familiar with accessing data from us. Or you can just give me a call. I'm happy to explain that a little bit more detail. Preset scales. Oh, Stephen explaining the preset scales for me. All right. So I don't see any other questions per se. And I think we're at the end of our time, so people are probably starting to sign off. But again, if you do have questions, feel free to contact me directly, which you can do. I'll just show you where all our contact info is. So general info and data questions, that's me. And my phone number's there as well. So don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions about the interactive map viewer, which, as I said, there's always the chance I'm just going to have to say I don't know or we can't fix that right now. The other issue with our viewer is the fact that we have just recently stood this up, and we're also in the midst of a whole bunch of changes here at VCGI, sort of IT internal stuff that nobody else needs to worry about. But because of that and the fact that the interactive map viewer is now up, it's not really a priority right now. So any aspects of it that don't work the way you would like them to work, and perhaps even the way I would like them to work, probably aren't going to get dealt with for a few months. But we hope that in the state that it's in now, it's still pretty darn useful and gives you access to lots of data and imagery. Some of the questions that just occurred to me that people have asked that are a little bit different now with this new viewer have to do with things like the age of the imagery in the background or specific dates that the imagery was taken, and that unfortunately is not information that you can access through the viewer anymore. So if anyone has questions about that kind of thing, just contact me or somebody else at VCGI, and we'd be happy to help with that. Okay, I think that's it. So as I said, if anyone missed it, this webinar has been recorded. It will, in the next week or so, get posted to our website in the event archive page in the webinar section. You will receive a follow-up email from GoToWebinar tomorrow, and it will have a link to that page. So don't click on it tomorrow, or if you do, just be patient. But save that link, and if I don't post it in the next week, feel free to email me and remind me that I said I would do that, but I will plan to do that. So thank you to everyone for showing up today and for sending questions if you did or information. And hope you all have a good day and have fun using the viewer. Hope it's useful to you. Thanks.